Hi, I'm John. This is my show, An American Scheme, where I'm proving that Diana Ross is Michael Jackson's actual mother. So, what I'm going to show you here is a recording of Berry Gordy talking about the first time he met Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. This was done at the 2012 inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where the Miracles were being inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Berry Gordy was speaking on them. Okay, so he gives this little speech. So I'm going to show you what he's talking about here. I'm gonna stop it a few times and talk through it and stuff a little bit. Okay, so here we go.
Well, the first time I met the Miracles, they were recording, they auditioning for Jackie Wilson's manager. I happened to be the writer for Jackie Wilson. I had written To Be Loved and Lonely Teardrops, and Repetit, brother. And they were turned down, the Miracles were turned down. I happened to be in the office writing some songs, and when they were turned down, I couldn't believe it because they looked too much like the Platters, because they had Claudette was in the group. And so I quickly stopped writing and ran out in the hallway, and I said, "You guys were great." And Smokey thought I was trying to audition too, so he said, "So what, who are you?" And I said, "My name is Berry Gordy." And he said, "Berry Gordy, you write songs with Jackie Wilson, and you wrote Repetit and To Be Loved?" And I said, "Yes."
Okay, so first thing here is that, so this here, when this occurs, the really important thing is the date. This occurred in August of 1957. What he's talking about here is he's telling you when he met Smokey Robinson. And what I'm trying to explain, and he tells you a little bit of it here, is that was the big part of Motown. And it was Smokey Robinson. It was the meeting of the two. See, at this time, Berry Gordy is still working in, this is the Brunswick studio. He's in there. He's not Motown. Motown's nowhere near, it's nothing. He has not done one step towards Motown. He's still working on being a writer at this time. Without this meeting of Smokey, without him then walking out of that place and gaining Smokey and the Miracles, then using them, that's where it all went forward. That's where they started to build Motown. It was the two of them, the two of them together. So the important things here are that it was in August of 1957. And with my story, what I'm saying is that Michael Jackson is born in August of 1958. So basically 1 year after this encounter, Michael Jackson's born. Okay? And Diana Ross, so when Smokey Robinson, so after this, Smokey Robinson would have went right back into his little neighborhood, and Diana Ross is there. But Claudette Robinson, who ends up, I can't remember her real name, but Claudette, who ends up being married to Smokey just a couple years after that, she's in the band there too. So if Smokey ends up having a little bit of a love affair with Diana Ross, who's living right down the street, of course, he tells Diana Ross, he tells her, "Hey, I met Berry Gordy. Yeah, we're working together now." So Smokey would have informed, Diana would have known this was happening. So what I'm saying happened is that at some point there that Diana seduces Smokey. Because they've known each other. I'm saying at some point there, she lets him have sex with her, and she actually gets pregnant from it. And not only does she become pregnant, that kid becomes Michael Jackson. But they couldn't keep the kid, because let me show you a little bit more here of the Berry Gordy thing here.
Thank you. And from then on, I said, "Who wrote your songs?" He said, "I did." And I said, "You got any more?" And he read off 100 songs to me. And all of them had something, but not enough to be a hit record.
So like right there, Berry Gordy, because he sees, okay, this guy has something for me to work with, because see, Berry Gordy's a writer. So Berry Gordy, and see, Berry Gordy was also writing for the Jackie Wilson, and they he was actually official, they had written some hit songs. So Berry Gordy actually had an understanding of the full development process of the songwriting towards the end of developing it towards a hit, and seeing the entertainer have to develop that hit and sing it. So he had an understanding, but he hasn't done it yet, but he knows what he's doing now. And then so when he gets Smokey, he sees in him everything. He sees this guy is a good song. He's young though. Smokey's, at this time, he's not even 18. He's not 18 at this time. He's getting close to it. But so Berry can see in him exactly what he wants. He says he's got a good young band with a good, talented songwriter. And Berry's a songwriter, and they can work together. And that's what happened. They developed a lot of the songs together. It's how they started working out together. And that's how Motown got developed. And that's why you're going to hear him speaking in such high regards about Smokey here.
So we got together, and finally he came up with a record called Got a Job. The answer to the Silhouettes Get a Job. And I just loved it. And that was the beginning of their career. And since that time, he's been the genius of Motown. The soul of Motown, the genius of Motown, and the genius in my life, my very, very best friend.
The genius in my life, my very, very best friend, the soul of Motown. Okay, you see how, my very, very best friend. Even to the point where Smokey Robinson's children, one of them's named Berry, after Berry Gordy, and the other one's named Tamla, which was the first part of the Motown, was Tamla Records, was the first part. So Smokey basically devoted his child's names towards him. So that shows you how close their friendship is. And that's what a lot of people don't really, really, really understand, that it was Berry and Smokey. It was Berry and Smokey that made Motown. It's not just Berry. It's Berry and Smokey. It started from the moment when they met like he describes here, when they met, that's where Motown, they started working together. They develop together, and they create Motown together. It's all together. All of it's together. That's why they'd be very best friend. That's what I'm trying to stress to you is, now, if Diana Ross gets pregnant, right, just a few months after this man, think about it in the real world where they're at in their time in their lives. Okay, there's no Motown. They're on the verge, okay? Berry Gordy's married. He's got kids at this time. He's like 29 years old when they meet at this time. He's married and has children. He's wanting to make it. Okay, he's about willing to, he knows he can do it. And what would he be willing to do at that point if he had to do one little thing to make it? Because he saw at that point. And so what I'm saying is that Diana Ross gets pregnant. And then on Diana Ross's 14th birthday, which would be March 26th of 1958, at that time she changes high school. That's when she enrolls into the Cass Tech. So what I'm saying with my story would be that by that time, I'm saying that we know that Diana's pregnant, and then she has been making adjustments in her life because of the pregnancy. And I'm saying the change in the school is a reflection on that. And so what I'm saying is that when Smokey tells Berry Gordy, hey, there's this girl down the street and she's 14 years old. That's the key. She's 14 years old. And see, here's Berry Gordy on the verge of Motown. He can see it in his head. He understands. He has Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. He has himself as a writer. He understands that he can start here to build this, okay? He's getting ready to build Motown. I mean, he's seeing it in his head. And now, right after that happens, boom, now he's got Diana Ross pregnant with the child of the guy that he's leaning on for his future. He's already committed at this time. He's deep into it with Smokey. This is the key element of the whole motive about what I'm saying. And it's hard for me to get you people to listen to my stories and stuff, but this is the key of what I'm saying, of what happened. This is why it happened, is because Berry Gordy knew that if Smokey Robinson, because if you look in their real lives, what'll happen, you'll see that Smokey Robinson actually enrolls into, like when right after high school, he enrolls into an engineering in college. He does actually start to pursue, because the music hasn't officially become official. He's working on it, but he's smart, and he's actually going to school too. And I think I read that he was going to try and get a little bit of an engineering degree. But to me, going to the engineering degree, to me, more lies in the fact that he had a child, and he was still trying to figure out what he's actually going to do there with the child. Because if he doesn't have the child, I think he's so good and he's committed, I don't think he would have spent the time going to the school. I think he would have went ahead and just let that slide. But I think with the child, that he knows that he's got Diana and he's thinking he's going to be a father, I think him then keeping up his education falls more in line with my narrative. Everything falls in line with my narrative of the story. And so then let's say Berry Gordy then convinces Smokey. He says, look at Smokey, if you have a child from this girl, she's 14 years old, he says, I can't make you a star. And then this girl who's right here in the neighborhood, and if she has your child, it's just going to get out. And that's a thing that I don't think that Berry Gordy would have been willing to take that chance to allow Smokey, the guy that he's depending on his whole company, because you got to understand back then too, that it's for the black people, if their image is ruined, it's for them to overcome just that image, it's going to be completely devastating. So the image with Berry Gordy was really smart. He knew that with his acts, their image, he was forming that very carefully, was their image, and he understood. So he understands that if his number one act that he's using to develop all of Motown, if that guy ends up having a child from a 14-year-old girl, that's scandalous, very scandalous. And with the black people, and it would ruin the possibility of ruining the whole thing before it even started, because it hasn't made it yet. That's the other thing. If you look to when Michael Jackson's born in late August of 1958, Motown's not officially until 1961. I think, I know Tamla's in 1959, but I don't think Motown's till, it's either 60 or 61. So that's what I'm saying. The Michael part of it is before Motown's actually even established. They're still establishing it. They don't know exactly what's going on. But Berry Gordy knows one thing. He can't have a 14-year-old girl with a child from his main number one artist. This is the whole thing of what I'm saying, the motive of what happened. Then what I'm saying is that Berry Gordy and Joe Jackson know each other. Now, I've made a whole nother video about explaining how they know each other, so I'm not going to say that. But that's what I'm saying, is that Berry Gordy says to them, he makes all the arrangements with all their parents, and they work out the deal to, I don't know if Diana would have went there. That's the technicalities of how the birth occurred and stuff. But somewhere really close to from the birth, the Jacksons would have acquired that baby from Diana. And they got I believe they have a birth certificate of Michael officially, like, to the Jacksons. I think they probably just got that done with the doctor. That was all they would have had to do to cover it up, is just get a doctor to do that little thing for them. So now you've got Michael in the Jacksons' house, okay? So now you've got Joe Jackson is getting money from Berry Gordy. He would obviously be getting a little bit of money, right? But they don't know that Michael Jackson is going to be the future star. And the other thing is, Joe Jackson wouldn't know Smokey Robinson. Berry Gordy would have been smart enough to not make that connection whatsoever. He would not have let Joe Jackson know who Smokey Robinson was whatsoever. So then even whatever he knew about Diana Ross, like, that's the kind of thing, like, did he ever meet Diana? Like, would he have known, or would it just been they just gave him the baby? I'm not sure how those things exactly happen. There's little technical things. Because the thing is, I don't know that Joe Jackson knows that the baby came from Berry Gordy, but I don't know if he knows that the parents, who they actually were, until Diana came back into life. Then I would think that he probably would have figured it out. But So then if you look at the real life history of what actually occurs then after what I'm saying occurred at that moment, what occurs after that then? You get Diana, boom, at 15, she gets into the Primettes and she starts on her career right to Motown, right? She's like on a direct course, boom, right to Motown. You've got Joe Jackson. What he does is he starts with his Falcons. He goes and he starts trying to make a band because he wants to get to Berry Gordy. But the reason I know that Joe Jackson doesn't know about Smokey Robinson because he wasn't able to blackmail Berry Gordy with that. It would have been too much of a connection because Berry Gordy does not sign the Falcons, and Joe Jackson then has to go about his life. He as a band, because what happened is when he got Michael, Joe Jackson thinks, oh, okay, this is my opportunity. Look at the real life history of what occurred about these people in line with what I'm saying. So Joe Jackson then at that time, he goes with his band again because he had done that a long time in the past, but now he resurges that up and tries to get with the Falcons and try to become an artist himself because he knows he's got this direct connection to Berry Gordy. But it didn't work. He was not good enough, and Berry Gordy said, no, I'm not just going to give you a contract. And the leverage, that's why I know that the leverage that Joe had over him was not strong enough. It was just a kid. So he wasn't willing to, and then the kid wasn't from Berry Gordy. I think he would have believed it wasn't Berry Gordy, it was something else, you know? And then so I believe that he didn't want to ruin his relationship either. The leverage he had wasn't strong enough. Joe wouldn't have wanted to ruin the relationship. So Joe accepted the fact that Berry was not going to sign him, but remember, Berry's giving him a monthly payment too. So Joe's got to be like, well, okay, I want to keep that coming too. I don't want to mess that up. I don't want to ruin my future relationship. So Joe took it. But then what does Joe do after that? That's when Joe starts training his kids to play instruments. You know, he starts actually training Tito, because they make it seem like in the movie that Tito starts to learn how to play the guitar on his own. But that would not have happened. Joe, that guitar would have been very, very precious to Joe Jackson. So if Tito starts to learn the guitar, that's because Joe is actually there assisting him, which would be more of a reasonable explanation that the father taught the kid how to play the guitar. Then the kid secretly played his dad's card, the very forceful Joe Jackson, you know. That he would secretly play that guitar, or no? Would it be more that the dad is teaching the kid to play the guitar, which is much more of a logical explanation, but in the movie they say he secretly did it. That doesn't really make sense. So then you've got Joe Jackson now is training his kids to play instruments and stuff. He's starting to work them. He doesn't know exactly what he's going to do, but he's starting to do what he can, you know. He doesn't know exactly. But then when that's why at the first sign when Michael actually shows talent at 5 years old, think about the narrative with my story. At 5 years old, instantly Joe Jackson now basically drops everything in his life and puts all of everything. He's going to rely on this kid. And now think about the harsh reality of who Joe Jackson. Do you really think Joe Jackson would have Joe Jackson is not the kind of person to say to your kid, oh, you're so good, I'm going to trust you and we're going to make it. Joe Jackson's not that kind of guy. He would have worked him and forced him to prove he was really good before he ever would have went on the road and trusted him. But that's not what happened. Joe instantly basically trusts him, which goes with the narrative of my story, that Joe has a connection, that he has a serious connection through the kid now. And now that's the kid with the talent and the connection, that's why Joe now puts the trust into him. That's how it happens. My story completely always follows the proper narrative when you hear my story, because their story and all of your people's story, you guys can't do this. Not like what I do. You don't do it. I'm the one who actually explains everything. And let's go back to the Diana Ross part here. So Diana Ross, Berry Gordy is telling her the real story is, I'm not going to sign you into Motown until you're 18 years old. He's telling her, no, not till you're 18. And see, think about the thing with him. If he had the audacity to demand Diana Ross at 18 years old, think about him signing the Jacksons in the real world. If he doesn't have the connection to the Jacksons, he didn't want to sign kids. It would have been, he was very, very reluctant to sign a kids. And a whole kids group, it was just going to be something that he was not going to be willing to do, you know, but he did it. He did do it though. And he worked it the right way and everything worked out great. But it was because the kid, now think about the way he talks about Smokey Robinson. Now, when he sees Michael Jackson and when he knows that Michael Jackson's the son of Diana Ross and Smokey Robinson, think about the respect now that he has for that kid. It's a trust now that he's going to trust that kid in a way that the other narrative doesn't really go along with that. But when you hear my story and then you hear the narrative of how much he trusts Smokey Robinson, when he hears that that's Smokey's kid, then he sees the talent, now he trusts it. Everything follows the narrative of my story. Diana Ross gets into Motown, and then she forces her way to the head of the Supremes. You know, the people always talk about how did that really happen, because she's obviously not the best singer out of the band there. She was not the best. And they always talk about how she kind of forced her way in and that's how she became the boss, Diana Ross the boss. And then by 1965, Diana Ross is in an actual relationship with Berry Gordy, which Berry Gordy being the owner of the company and Diana Ross being one of his main acts, it's questionable that if he should actually be involved in a relationship with her, but he does, and which absolutely follows the narrative of my story, because he's much older than her too. There's also a large age difference. So there's a lot of questionable things about that. But when you understand that my story, it follows the narrative perfectly why they get into the relationship, because they have this serious connection, you know, and that's how, and she's forcing her way. She's right there with him. And, you know, so they're in a relationship from 65 to like 70, and they do have a kid there at that time. And, you know, so I'm going to get this cut off here now. And so that's what I'm trying to show you, that right there at the beginning, what you'll see is that everything of what I'm saying follows the actual narrative of the history of what we all know. The story that you guys all just say out, you guys all explain it was Michael didn't have a childhood. Okay, you think that explains, and you say, well, he does. Does that explain it the way that I explain it? And then think about the narrative that in 1970, when the Jacksons then come to Motown, that Diana Ross tells Michael Jackson, hey, she tells him the real story. Hey, you're my kid. Smokey's your dad. This is the story. We had to give you away because the development of Motown happening now, you know. That's when the song Billie Jean. She says, I am the one, but the kid is not my son. Diana Ross is telling Michael Jackson both of those things. She says, you're the one. You're the reason all of this happened. You're the one. You're the one. The reason all this happened. That's what she's telling him. But she says, but the kid is not my son, because so in public, you don't get to be my son in public. The kid is not my son. You're not my son. You're the Jackson. That's why she says both things. You're the one, but you're not my son. Because think of the narrative of my story. That's what she's saying to him at 10 years old. And then think of Michael Jackson in the real world. If Michael Jackson was in the Jacksons with his brothers right there and starting to develop as an entertainer, he would have had all this attention through the 70s. And you see him hanging out with women, but it's not the sexual relations. And even if he was gay or if he was a pedophile, those scenarios, Michael Jackson would have been having sex with these girls in the 70s. In those scenarios, that's the thing. In all of the scenarios about what you go, even if Michael Jackson is a pedophile, even if Michael Jackson is gay, or even if Michael Jackson likes women, okay, so all of those scenarios, the Michael Jackson star that's hanging out with his brothers, that's getting the attention, somewhere in there, Michael would have sex. That's a fact. It's a simple fact. It would have happened. But I'm saying Michael Jackson's a virgin, which when you look, he's Peter Pan. And then so the other thing is nobody really can explain that. And they try and use the childhood stuff and it doesn't really explain it. But my story, think about the narrative that Diana tells him the truth at 10 years old. So now at 10 years old, Michael's hit with, he's not a real Jackson. He has to remain living as a Jackson. Michael's dealing with serious issues at 10 years old. Well, that's the other thing. So he's a victim of a young love because his mother, Diana Ross, is 14. So Michael's also now the victim of a young love, 14. And he realizes, oh, shoot, he's like 10, 11. He's like, right, he's getting close to that age. So he's seeing the attention from the women. So Michael understands now that if he starts to have sex, it can see it in his head. With the narrative of my story, Michael's seeing that a young love can turn bad into like just mad chaos because now look at where he's at. He's not thinking I'm having fun with these girls. He's thinking, darn, if I do this and the kid could be an orphan and have no father, what am I going to do? I mean, just madness of complex things, of issues of what he's dealing with. And so what happens is that's how Michael learns to say no to women. And he does it for such a long period that he's a virgin. And once you hold on to that virginity and he's a star, it was a thing that he knew. If he ever had sex, he would have given that person an immense amount of power over him. And it was not something he was ever willing to relinquish from that point because of how big a star he became and how big of an issue it become from all of the complex issues of what I'm saying of what he was dealing with. And when you listen to his songs, you look at his real life, the person he actually is, that he goes to live at narrative, he's constantly talking about Peter Pan. In my story, consistently hits from the beginning, way back before he's born. I explain it all constantly. Boom, 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 everything, all of it. I just keep going. There's not any part of it that I don't explain. But you people don't want to believe it. You don't even want to give it a try. Look at the truth. You want to find out who Michael Jackson is? I mean, here it is.